With the 2025 NFL Draft creeping closer, we're breaking down our consensus top 10 prospects. These aren't necessarily the top 10 prospects overall, though. These are the top 10 prospects that we think should be on Ryan Pohl's speed dial. That on this episode of the Halas Huddle podcast. Huddle up! As always, I'm Rob Schwartz. Tonight with me is Justin Onayemi and Bob Weiss, good friends and co-hosts of the Halas Huddle podcast. You guys ready to break down our top 10 players in this draft for the Chicago Bears?
Absolutely. It was tough coming to a consensus, but we did it. And we might have a few throw-ins towards the end. But I think that's kind of how this draft has been. You're not going to hear as much about the earlier guys because you've heard a lot about them, both on the Halas Huddle and other places as well.
And again, these are going to be specifically for the Bears. So a lot of these early guys probably aren't necessarily going to fall to the Bears anyway, right? But we got to get 10 names on there. If for some reason somebody does fall to 10, well, at least we mentioned them here.
And we've talked about certain guys possibly getting to that 4 spot. And I mean, we've seen it happen a little bit here and there in our mock simulators, and we have gotten draft, we've traded up for those guys. So and I've seen other, ESPN and NFL guys who are doing the same thing, especially with Abdul Carter getting to 4. So if that happens, and I just gave away, I think right here, our number one guy. Okay. Our number one guy, Abdul Carter. I think this was pretty easy. We all had him ranked number 1 in this draft class. And look, he is the best pass rusher in this draft class, but he also is a good run defender. He has the most tools in his tool chest. I don't know what else to say about the guy. I have been screaming that he's my number 1 player since January. I have not come away from that. I know you guys have obviously didn't start your process that early, but you guys have locked in on him as your number 1 guy. This is the guy. If he somehow, I know he's got the injuries, not anything to be concerned about. If he somehow gets to 4, if I am Ryan Poles, I am trying to move up to get him. I just am. Because he is a once-in-a-lifetime type player. And we talked about it recently in our top 5 needs, that they need to find guys who can be players at all pro levels. That's what Abdul Carter brings to the table.
Absolutely. He's kind of wanted 2 guys in this draft who project to be at the top of that league at their respective positions. So that the next guy here actually could project to be near the top of the league at 2 different positions. It's Travis Hunter out of Colorado. The guy just had an unbelievable season. Every single possible award that you could win for his 2 positions, he did. We're talking about 15 touchdown catches and 4 interceptions. The guy's just a beast. I understand that maybe wide receiver and cornerback aren't near the top of either need for the Bears, but as we just discussed, the biggest need the Bears have is elite all-pro level players, and Travis Hunter would be that.
Yeah, I'm just going to touch because I just wanted to point this out. But when I was going through my draft rankings, I keep forgetting that he is in both the cornerback and the wide receiver section. I keep talking about Will Johnson as my CB1. No, he's not. Travis Hunter is. I keep talking about Tet being my wide receiver 1. Guess what? He is. I think he's a better receiver than Travis Hunter. But Travis Hunter is a top 3 receiver in this draft. So it's how can you not love having that?
Not really the purpose of the episode, but I'm just curious, how do the Bears see him? How do different teams see him? A lot of NFL players, or former NFL players, I should say, have talked about, he probably should focus on one and really learn it. And then if you want to use him as a gadget, maybe you can. But to pile that on somebody to be play both sides at a high level, who knows? But the talent is there. He's shown the production at both positions. That's why he's number 2 on our list.
All right. 1 and 2 are off the board. Justin, you're going to take number 3, I believe.
Yes, I am. So number 3, Mason Graham out of Michigan. Amazing quickness, knows how to play his position, causes disruptions, highly productive throughout his college career. If anything, we kept saying that if he's there at 10, you run up and draft him. We don't think he'll fall that far. His measurables maybe could have him fall a little bit, but honestly, I do believe that would be a mistake by a lot of teams to pass on him. Because if Abdul Carter wasn't in this draft, you'd be looking at him as like the most impactful defensive lineman there is coming into this draft class. And I really think he'll have a high floor in a sense. And that's what I think when you draft a guy that early, that's what you really want. The star potential is there and you want that too, but you want that high secure floor. And I think he's going to provide that.
Yeah, a lot of confidence that he's going to make it to that second contract.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, but Rob, he was a very good wrestler in high school too.
And we know how much I like wrestlers, especially on the trenches. All right,
Let me take 4 too, Rob.
Yep.
Although I'm not breaking any news here. Number 4, Ashton Genty. So in my mind, I'm looking at him as the best offensive prospect in this draft class. But again, that's because I'm kind of seeing Hunter more as a corner. But Ashton Genty, I mean, he does it all. He's a complete back. His production is undeniable. I mean, honestly, the only thing I could think could hurt him a little is just how productive he was in college. And when you think about at the running back position, almost like a pitcher in baseball, like you can only get so much out of a guy in a career. And he's already, carried the load at Boise State. I mean, to put up that production when everyone knows you're getting the ball, that's that much more impressive. He has all the skill sets you would want. And as Bob has referenced in previous episodes, is that worth it to put it all in on a guy like that? Well, it might be, because he might be that special. So far on our list, I don't know if the likelihood of the Bears getting any of these guys. For a while, we had to decide, should they take him at 10? And now it's more like, will he even make it to 10? And at the running back position, I think that's a lot to say about how highly touted he is.
I just want to touch on the naysayers out there who want to point out that he only averaged 3.5 yards per carry against a team like Penn State, which obviously made it into the college playoffs, right? He, as Justin just said, was the only thing Boise State had, and he still averaged 3.5 yards per carry. They were hammering him, and he was still fighting for yardage on every single play. It was insane.
Yeah, I know what you hear from the scouts who watched that game. Like, he maximized every yard that was available to him in that game to even average 3.5. And if you're worried about production, he played Boise State, didn't play anybody, go take a look at the Oregon tape. Go take a look at the Oregon box score. They were a pretty good team too, and he destroyed them.
And, we have everyone complain about DeAndre Swift not falling forward half the time, right? That's not going to be the case with a guy like Ashton Genty.
Well, and I even think, too, Ben Johnson wants to get play action as part of the weaponry of an offense. And when you have a threat like that, that opens up the play action game as well. So,
all right, let's move on to number 5 on our list. Another, what I would call a playmaker, a guy who can pretty much just do everything. He can play quarterback. He can be fullback better than Doug Kramer can. You get the ball in his hands, and he is going to just make things happen. I know he's not necessarily the fastest guy. He's not necessarily the biggest guy. His hands might not be considered the best either. But look, he is top elite talent in all of those areas. And what I love most about him is the way that he moves with the ball. These intermediate throws that Caleb Williams succeeded with very well last year, you get him the ball in open space, kind of reminds me of Travis Kelce in a little bit of a way, where he can stiff arm guys, he can move over guys, plays a totally different game than Cole Kmet. So I think they mesh well together. This would be a fantastic addition for the Bears if by chance he is there at 10. I have no qualms with him taking Tyler Warren.
Yeah, I think the biggest endorsement for him is what Ben Johnson said at the owners' meeting about him was that he immediately said that he was a football player. He didn't say, I like him as a tight end. It was like, he is a football player, and our defensive coordinator would be terrified of what that I could do with that guy. So he's a weapon. I know some other things he's been criticized for about being an older player, 5 years before he started dominating. But you also got to remember how jam-packed that tight end room was at Penn State during his entire stay there. Freiermuth was there early on, and then there's been 2 or 3 other tight ends that have been drafted in the NFL during his time there. So this was really his first year to just be the full-time guy, and then, look what he did with that.
I think he could. In some way scenarios, I could see him slipping to 10, and I'd be excited if the Bears took him. And a big part of that is Ben Johnson and knowing he would get creative in how to use him. If we were in the previous regime, I don't know if they would even know what to do with a guy like that.
What's a tight end? When you throw the ball to him once every 4 games? All right. Bob, I know you are really big on this guy, so you're going to take number 6
I think I'm the
on our list.
Halas Huddle champion for Will Campbell here. I'm not going to say I don't care about the arm length, but what I do care about is that this guy stepped into the SEC as an 18-year-old true freshman and dominated. And then he dominated the next 2 years. Show me the reps, show me the tapes where he's getting beat because of the arm length, and then we can have a discussion like this. And it's not just the fact that he never gave up a sack. Listen to his press conferences. Listen to the man speak. He is a leader. He is full of passion. He's, they talk about he's a little dirty, right? But he also is brilliant. As the left tackle, he's calling out protections for LSU in the offense. Like, he has every single thing you look for in an elite offensive lineman, except maybe 5/8 of an inch on his arms. And I'm just not really willing to overlook the rest of it just because of those measurables. And to be honest, we all kind of had our own rankings that are absolutely consensus rankings. I had, Will Campbell a little higher on my list, but, I understand, why he's on this list, number 6, but he is a stud offensive lineman, and I'd be happy to have him on the team.
Think about the type of defensive players the SEC puts into the league every single year, and he's going up against those guys giving up nothing. Now, all of a sudden in the NFL, he's going to be facing them again and can't stop them because his arms? I don't know about that. So the production is there, like you said. Another guy that if he's at 10, if they think he can play left tackle, that's an excellent.
That's the big thing. At 10, I love it. The Patriots are kind of rumored that maybe they're looking at him at 4, and there's a little bit more risk there, because if it turns out he is just a really good guard for the next 10, 12 years, that's not what you want to do it for. But at 10, come on, best player available. Snatch him up.
I had to throw the picture back up because I don't know. He kind of looks like, we talked about that T-Rex look to him. I don't know. I think that's why he was a little bit lower on my rankings.
Rob, I'll give him my arms and let him play.
There you go. Honestly, that would be the ideal player right there.
I've never measured, but they're long.
They are very long, especially, if you compare like the height to the length of your arm span, it's very impressive. All right. Everyone knows how high I am on number 7. Just like Bob said, the reason why he fell to this point is because Justin and Bob had him lower in their rankings. Mykel Williams, this is the guy that I would pound the table for at number 10. I know a lot of people don't think that he's going to be good enough. They don't see him as a 10 to 12, 15 sack guy. I don't care. I just want a guy who's going to consistently get to the quarterback, who can contain on the outside. I want a guy who's going to improve. He's only 20 years old. He is going to improve. He played against top-level talent at Georgia. This is the guy that if he is there at 10, I'm perfectly okay with it. And I honestly am jumping up for joy. And I'll be like, I told you that's who they were going to take. I told you he fits Dennis Allen's system. I'm a little bit overpumped here, but the guy is just, he's a massive man. And I just think he has enough pass rush tools. He's one of the better run defenders in the league. So he's in the draft class. So he's easily going to see playing time right there. You're not going to see the miscontainment that we would see with Dominique Robinson on continuous basis that drove me absolutely nuts. I want Mykel Williams on the Chicago Bears.
Would it be bad to have 2 Montez Sweats?
Nope.
And Rob, it's not just it was very nice breakdown that you just gave now. You've had me convinced for a while now that he'd be a fantastic selection at 10. He's one of the few guys in this draft class, especially who might be there at 10, who's got floor because of the run defense. He's got that just football player. He knows where to be and why to be there, and he's going to be there. But he's also got ceiling because he's 20 years old. He's got the athleticism. He's got the length. So he's got it both. He's got the fit for Dennis Allen's defense. Just to kind of prop up our boy Rob here a little bit, he was huge last year on Jared Verse. That was his guy. And then we're all like Roma Doomsday, but what if we had Jared Verse at 9, which Rob was totally fine with last year, right? So, you got a little bit,
and I'm not putting him in the
Jared in your calf on the defensive end position here. So I'm definitely willing to hear about Michael Williams.
And I'm not putting him in the Jared Verse category. I would definitely not have him ranked that high, but people talk about his get off not being fast enough. And a lot of people are watching the 2024 tape where he's got a bum ankle. Look, it's not as fast as Mike Green. It's not as fast as Abdul Carter, but it's fast enough. And people said the same thing about Gervon Dexter, and his get off has improved over the first year of his career to his second year. It can be done. I know Corey Wooten said that it's very unlikely to get better, but I saw it with Gervon Dexter. I'm expecting it to see it again here with Michael Williams.
Coming in at number 8, we have Armand Membu. And here's a guy very productive in college, played right tackle, and very good athlete. I know at the Underwear Olympics he impressed. He's a little bit shorter than what you would want. And again, for the Bears, this is a Bear-centric view. You're more so looking at him if you think he can be a left tackle. And I think that's why he's a little lower down on the list than maybe he could be. Other than that, I mean, he definitely can get out in space. And when he gets out there, he's wreaking havoc. And so I think he would fit in nicely if they think he can play left tackle. Now, that's not something, I'll be honest with you, that's not something I feel comfortable being able to assess, looking at the limited amount of information that I have. And I know, Rob, you said you don't believe he's capable of making that switch. But a very good athlete, solid offensive lineman. And if they needed a right tackle, I think he'd be a couple spots further up on our list potentially.
Yeah, so this is probably the first spot on our list here where, like, if this ends up being the best available, maybe you're looking to trade down instead of taking Membo. But, like, that doesn't mean he's any less of a fantastic prospect. Like, I don't understand why the Raiders would take Genty over him, to be honest. Like, build your trenches. You have nothing there. Like, Genty would be a luxury for Oakland, right? The Bears have at least addressed the top level of their trenches. So, take a weapon. But Membo is just a stud. I think he's going to be a really good player. He might be one of these tackles that take, 2 or 3 years, a lot like Darnell Wright, before he's really at the top of his game. But he's got all the tools,
Yeah, it's interesting, as much as I've said negative things about him, he's still number 10 currently in my overall rankings. He just doesn't make my top 10 Bears rankings. So he's definitely a guy that should be taken very early in this draft. And I, like to Bob's point here, like, I can't imagine that some of these other teams who are in need of a right tackle are going to pass up on him.
Yeah, but, when he gets to 10, best player available, he's sitting there. You really have to consider it a lot. And so that's the prospect is kind of the exact same story. You wouldn't necessarily consider a cornerback. Maybe a pressing positional need for the Bears, but Will Johnson out of Michigan is a stud. All right, this guy, he was hurt this last year, but I mean, he's pivotal to the national championship 2 years ago. He was super productive in the games that he did play this year. Just two picks in just 6 games that he played. The guy's a football player. You listen to this, these episodes we do. I talk about, I just want football players. I want football players. I want football players. He would be the best football player on the board if this is where it was at 10, and he's sitting there as our 9th best prospect.
So, 10 is going to be a tough spot to pick depending on how things go 1 through 9. But if they were to select Will Johnson, I feel like that pretty much spells the end of Tyreek Stevenson in Chicago. And in my mind, that would be a little bit of a disappointment. We know he had a rough season last year, very much so with that debacle in Washington. But I'm curious how Tyreek Stevenson would play in a Dennis Allen system, since he's more of a man cover corner. And I don't know, Rob, if you can speak to this, but from what I know of Will Johnson, he thrives more so in zone. So I don't know fit-wise, but again, Bob, you're right. Best player available is a powerful.
The Dane Brugler scouting report says he could do both man or zone. Is kind of scheme, whatever, not scheme dependent, whatever the opposite of that would be. And I guess just what we talked about with Membo, like, if our prospect number 7.5 is probably trade down, right? So I'd probably advocate for a trade down over drafting Will Johnson. Like, that's fine. You find another team that needs a corner, but if you're pressed to make that pick because you're going to have a partner, I think you can do a lot less than a good football player like Will Johnson.
Yeah, he's definitely scheme versatile. I think he plays a little bit better, though, in zone than he does in man, but he's still the best corner in this draft class. I have Jahade Barron very close, but he's a nickel. And although he's getting me many interceptions in my NCAA college football game against my kid, I got a little too excited and originally had him in my top 10 and had to take him out. So let's move on. Speaking of Texas, though.
Speaking of Texas, all right, our number 10 prospect, who was on, I think, 2 of our lists, is Kelvin Banks. Now, he's not the most exciting guy. I've described him many times as a kind of a high floor, low ceiling player, but he's a guy that you can plug in, definitely at 4 spots along the offensive line. I bet you he probably could play center if you need to. He's just one of these guys, a lot like Kenneth Grant when we did in the fan mock, where you're just not going to regret drafting this guy. He's going to be solid. He's going to be good. And when you talk about, building through the trenches, just get guys like these, like maybe because of the rotational natures of things, maybe you would rather have a defensive tackle than a guy who might not necessarily be starting as a rookie, but he's an excellent football player. A lot of people might project him as a guard better than tackle, but he was an excellent tackle, almost, hit all the production things that Will Campbell did. The guy's just a stud.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said there, Bob, but for some reason, I just feel like if his name was called, a little part of me would be bummed. But that's the nature of this particular draft.
It's not sexy, but it would. Again, it's a floor pick, right? It's one of those you're just not going to regret it in 3 years that Kelvin Banks is on your team.
But that was kind of like Darnell Wright. Like, I felt like Darnell Wright wasn't a sexy pick either. And he has turned out to be.
I do feel like Darnell Wright had a higher ceiling than how I feel about Kelvin Banks, though.
Correct. I agree with you. And he was one of the guys that I had on my top 10 for our consensus. And I think just like most of these tackles, like you said, could play at any position. So it's like, if it doesn't work out and, you move him inside, it takes time. We've talked about it. It's not something that just happens overnight, but these guys, eventually can succeed as a guard. So it would be one of those situations where it's like he's not like this playmaker. I think I might rather have like Colston Loveland if I wanted to feel like I got a sexy pick, but this is, like Bob said, a football player against really good competition, and he's going to be there for years to come.
And none of us know how this draft's going to shake out. Maybe they get somebody who's on our top 10 list after trading back to 14. That would be the ideal scenario. But
Right. And, this is our top 10 list, but number 10 here, like, we're not saying that all of a sudden there's a cutoff from 10 to 11, right? Like, these players exist in tiers. We had to list somebody at 10. Kelvin Banks was on 2 of our lists, so that's where we went. But who are some of these other guys that might be in a similar tier as Kelvin Banks?
So I got one for our honorable mention. And I feel like the honorable mention could kind of be broken down into 2 categories of like guys who maybe deserve that top 10, but maybe just not with the Bears. And the fit is kind of a question or something kind of character based. But for me, this guy it's more so that, again, he's not that sexy of a pick, but Malaki Starks. Played 3 years as a starter at Georgia. So again, you have this SEC level of competition and was just solid the entire time. Very smart player, can play both safety positions, which I think from the Bears standpoint, you're not really sure about the future of either of your safeties. And so to get a guy like that, again, you're kind of probably in a situation where you can't trade back and you're just making the pick. But I think he would fit nicely with what they need. I just feel like I'd be a little let down again if that was the selection, but worthy.
Yeah, and I had 2 guys on my list who didn't make the cut as well. One of these was actually a guy that I wasn't as high on, but again, and I'm going to throw this out there because I've been told that it's okay that I do it. Gary Ross has made it known to me that Jalon Walker is on the Chicago Bears radar. And if that is to be true, look, I didn't think he was a scheme fit. I really didn't. What he's telling me is that they see him as, the third linebacker. So the Sam linebacker when it's not in nickel. And then you bring him in on pass rushing special, downs where he can just pin his ears back and go get the quarterback. I understand that. That makes sense to me. He's a little bit on the smaller side. So again, it wasn't somebody who I was considering, but look, I had him high enough in my rankings, just not for the Bears. Based on that information, I did have him in at that number 10 spot. The number 9 spot for me was Walter Nolen, a defensive tackle out of Ole Miss. Look, I love Jervon Dexter. I think I'm probably higher on him than the two of you. To go out and get another 3-tech kind of doesn't really make a lot of sense, but I'm just going to go get the best player available. And to me, I think he does fit that bill. And you can't have enough pass rush specialists. We've talked about in our top 5 needs. The Bears need a defensive rotation that's going to get to the quarterback. If you can bring in Walter Nolen and he's going to help you do that, by all means, please do it.
Well, to touch on Walker real quick, who you mentioned, when I said the safety position, future of the safety position is unknown, you could say the same thing about linebacker for the Chicago Bears. So you're not just drafting for this season. You're drafting for the future you plan on building.
Very good point.
And there's teams that think that he can play off-ball linebacker. So, I mean, that's a replacement for TJ Edwards perhaps in the future, although we all love TJ Edwards. But, I mean, that Jalon Walker pick would be the epitome of best player available. He's a really good football player. So he's sitting there at 10. You just take him and you figure out how to use a really good football player in your scheme.
I think Dennis Allen's one of those guys that probably could do that too. So,
yeah.
All right, well, that's it. That's our top 10 consensus. Please go to the comment section. Who do you think deserves to be in your top 10? Why are they not on our top 10? Let us know. Who did you agree with? Who are you like, yeah, that's the guy I hope the Bears get? Did I convince you that Michael Williams is a top 10 pick? I sure hope I did. Until next time, though, bear down, claws up. Maybe.